Hey, everybody, thanks for joining me today. With me on my podcast today is Matt Rogers. He's the owner of Papenhausen Hardware. They're a single store hardware store in the San Francisco area. And we're going to spend some time talking about Matt's stores, but his experience, the reason he's on is actually unique. He's had two very disruptive fires that nearly put him out of business. And if not for the experience that he had dealing with insurance, and if not for the efforts that he had made with his insurance agents in advance of these fires, he would be out of business. And so I thought that that was just a cautionary tale that I thought dealers would want to listen to. But in addition to that, Matt is the founder of the CRHWA, and that's the California Retail Hardware Association, and they are a trade group that represents independent home improvement retailers in California, and they're doing some pretty cool work. And in addition to that, he started a group on LinkedIn to try to gather independent home improvement retailers into one spot and try to help them speak with one voice or a more consistent message, at least within the industry. And so I love the work that Matt is doing. It's really well aligned with a lot of what I think is important. Dealers should be speaking with one voice as much as possible. Dealers should be congregating in real life or digitally as much as possible, because it's our disparate nature which makes us so easy for the large manufacturers who supply us to take advantage of. And it's when we come together that we're strongest. And so Matt's helping us do that. And so thank you, Matt, for doing that. But thank you for listening. Like and subscribe, and shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to hear next. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining me today. With me today on my podcast is Matt Rogers. Matt is the owner of Papenhausen Hardware there in San Francisco. Matt, how are you this morning?
Doing well, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for being on the show. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about Papenhausen Hardware, but before I let you introduce yourself, you're also on the show because you're involved with a trade organization. That's the California Retail Hardware Association, a new group for home improvement retailers on LinkedIn. And so we want to talk about that a little bit. But before we get to that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience at Papenhausen?
Sure. Happy to do that. I think we might share some very similar backgrounds as far as I've been in the hardware business 35 years or so, just small independent store. Started out quite early. Well, actually, I had the entrepreneurial bug at an early age. I've always just been interested in earning money, whether it was odd jobs or little businesses. So that's just been in my blood. As I got older, started to take it a little more seriously, went to school for small business management. And while I was in school, realized I needed to get a real job just to make ends meet. So that job happened to be at the local hardware store while I went to school and got my degree. And just so happened that the owner, who was in his 70s, had Parkinson's and was looking to retire. And I had already written a business plan on buying the business. And so I was like, well, looks like I've got this all figured out. I just have to figure out the financing. So I went to him and I said, hey, you know me, you'll finance everything, right? And that, of course, was not going to happen. But we were able to piece it together. And so before I was actually 22 when I was doing the negotiation, but before I graduated school, I was the owner of the store, just turned 23, and boom, there it was. It happened very quickly.
What a great story. And so you're a young man and in the business for a long time. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure to talk about when we spoke about your stores, Matt, during the prep, you talked about an experience you had with some fires, and particularly as related to insurance. And I thought it was a great learning opportunity. Why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So among the many memories of this business was having a devastating fire that totaled the business, not just once but twice. Distinctive.
Yeah, that's some bad luck right there. You're lucky you didn't get a call from the district attorney.
It's crazy. So anyway, the first fire was I had been owner about 10 years. still a little wet under the ears as far as business. And I had recently expanded our computer system, and I called up my insurance broker, and I was worried because it was about $25,000-$30,000 was more than the policy covered. So he said, no problem, we can take care of this. We got a special thing. And so he took care of it. Well, he made a mistake, and he filed it under protection under a power surge, not for any type of flood or fire or anything. So when we're going through the rubble, we discovered this, and that meant that I was going to be a little bit underinsured. And that worried me because this was everything. I devoted everything here. My broker didn't seem overly concerned, which was disturbing, but he kind of took me under his arm.
It's not his money.
No, he was a family friend, and I trusted him.
That doesn't make it his money either, man.
No, absolutely. So he kind of took me under his wing, and he said, let me kind of show you how insurance works. You think, well, I know insurance. You buy insurance and you're covered. There's a lot of intricacies, and the policy is really like a rule book. And so he was showing me how you can read and look at the rules, and as long as you stay within the rules, and the insurance companies, fine. That basically they play by the rules, you play by the rules. The problems that you hear about with insurance are people think, oh, well, I'm covered, and then they're not because it doesn't say that in the rule book. So anyway, I had to really scour the rules and find little individual areas in which I had coverage, but I wasn't taking advantage of that. And so bit by bit, I was able to piece together nearly everything that I was short. I think in the end, we were maybe down $4,000 or $5,000. So not something we couldn't recover from.
Right. And what I wanted to talk about, though, during our prep, we had spoken about the continuing operation insurance.
Yes.
As that had been what had you had said in the prep, like basically saved the whole day.
So that particular policy was a good policy, had a 1-year continuation, which allowed me to maintain my staff while the store was rebuilt. It took about 7 months. And that's
what I wanted to talk about, right?
Sure.
Because if you have a terrible fire, as Matt unfortunately has experienced twice, if you have a terrible fire, you're at risk of losing customers while you're closed. You're at risk of losing inventory. But what are you going to do for employees? Because your employees can't wait 6 months for you to rebuild your store. Yeah. And so Matt's story is a good one in that it reminds us we need to be able to keep our businesses going, even if all we're doing is rebuilding.
Right, and it's very important, and it's often not looked at when you have policies. And to sort of continue that process, the family friend broker, he had retired, and I was looking on to other insurance programs, and I went with one that was recommended by my main supplier as a great company. And in looking over their policy, their business continuation was for 60 days. And I don't think you can even get a building permit in 60 days. And I automatically red flag, had a lot of discussions with this company, and they just shrugged their shoulders and like, what, that's standard. I was able to recognize that ahead of time, then was able to find, actually ran into a person's my current broker, a guy named Aaron Heichman, who came from the hardware industry. He understood what was needed, and he knew where to find good insurance. So he has always kind of looked out for me, and I've had 100% confidence in him. So he now goes, his whole thing is 2 years minimum of business continuation. If I hadn't made that move then, when our second fire happened, we would have been devastated because that took a lot longer to rebuild. They didn't even start construction within 7 months. So we really had to work hard to kind of make it, keep our staff, because their continuation was for a year, management and myself was for 2 years. But what we ended up doing is setting up a temporary store right at that 1 year mark that we're able to maintain our staff. And so it was a pretty phenomenal move, but without knowing how the insurance worked, this would have never have, I mean, that would have been it. Would have been gone.
Yeah, and you know what I like about your story, first off, obviously you're still here, right? So you survived it. But what I like about your story is I do know dealers that have had catastrophic issues that cause them not to be able to recover.
Yeah.
It could be a fire, it could be theft, it could be a bunch of other things that could cause that. And insurance is a great tool to protect yourself against that. And so as a dealer, I always like to make sure. I was not a fan of overinsuring, but I like to make sure that I always had the proper amount of insurance. And so that meant making sure that my insurance agent knew how much inventory I had, making sure that I understood when I checked my insurance policies to see how much they're going to cover me to rebuild the store, replace my computer network, make sure on a yearly basis. I used to make sure that was always enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's extremely important. And it just, like I said earlier, it just gets overlooked because the impression is, oh, I have insurance, it covers it. But you get into the nitty gritty, it's very, you have to make sure that it's in there, just like you say, not over insure, but make sure you have the proper coverage.
And so insurance is very easy to cut. It always looks like an expense until the moment that you need it.
100%. But obviously, after 2 fires, I'm a firm believer in having that peace of mind. It's
having insurance.
It's necessary.
So I agree. So let's talk a little bit about the California Retail Hardware Association. That's the CRHWA. What is it that you guys are doing?
So my insurance broker, who has a background in retail and hardware, as I mentioned, has visits stores all the time. And he noticed something, that every single store is facing the same issues, particularly in California, where it's really difficult to, there's just challenges everywhere you look. And so he was commenting to me one day, he's like, why is it that all these stores have to do the same thing and they're all doing it by themselves? We should form a group that allows everybody to kind of work together and find some answers. And so that was sort of the core of it. And to be kind of worked on this together back and forth, sort of in an unofficial capacity, and ultimately came up with the CRHWA as just a label,
which we talked about. We talked about. I can't resist. Hardware is a single word, right?
I know. Doesn't
but
look.
You guys
nice,
are different. Hardware. I got it.
Yeah. So it just kind of was a way for stores to identify, or something for them to identify with, and then to kind of bring up these issues as they came about.
So you guys are a regional trade organization representing independent hardware stores in California.
Correct. And so we're not traditional in any way. We don't have a board. We have a sort of an unofficial group of stores that we talk to all the time. So they're representing multi-stores, they're representing big stores, small stores, all the co-ops and suppliers are in that group. So we hear all the intricacies of the business, but also the overall kind of problems that are percolated to the top. That's what we kind of concentrate on. And then we try to find a solution that works for everybody, and then kind of share that solution. So we don't, it's hard to explain because it's not traditional, but it is powerful. And a good example is COVID. When COVID came out, stores kind of got shafted with the vaccine rollout. We were essential businesses. We had to stay open. But then when they came out with the way the vaccine was coming out, hardware stores were just not on the list. So there was a lot of phone calls, a lot of concern. And while we never changed that, we found a loophole. And the loophole was that nursery workers or food production, so if you sold seeds or you sold plants, you could qualify in this other category and then go in. But
and so what we're talking about, just to be clear, while your workers were being forced to work as essential employees, they did not have access to the COVID vaccination for the ones that wanted it. And so what you helped do is move them up on the list of prioritization.
Right. California had a list, and then they had an overseeing body of maybe 50 people that were supposed to work on this list. And it just got missed, basically. Grocery store workers were there and whatnot, but it just got missed. But they weren't about to change it. There was no real way to change it. So despite we probably had more interaction with stores for this particular issue than anything else that I've seen. But
I
so
was going to say this is a perfect issue for an advocacy group.
right. Yeah. And so it was interesting because even like the National Association and different ones, I would come in and write letters or whatnot to kind of push it along. But there's Sacramento doesn't move very quickly, and it doesn't necessarily move where you want it to. So just by looking at the problem, we were able to kind of see, I forget who it was, someone kind of thought of this like, well, that's a definition that would fit in. And so it didn't really matter. I mean, what was happening is the vaccine was in so short quantity that they were regulating who could go in. It started, I think, right, with age. And so, but that was a good use of what our association can do.
There's value in any group of independents coming together and speaking together in any way. As a matter of fact, the very reason we get sort of short shrifted by the industry, by manufacturers, or even by insurance companies, frankly, if we were to all be together and all speak together with a single voice, we would always do better. And so any group that brings independent retailers together is extending the voice and extending the volume, raising the volume.
That's 100% what we're about. And it seems like we're all talking about is insurance, but I want to bring that up too. So because our group has as well as the retail, the insurance background, we've been able to form these relationships with insurance companies that have basically products and coverages that are only available to groups that's opened up. And so when California has, again, more issues, there's a lot of reasons that they're not writing coverages. Right. So there'll be calls about, oh, I just got canceled, I won't renew, or it's $80,000 to renew my policy. Through these new relationships with the companies that exist solely because it's a group, the coverage has been able to be found for these stores. So it's another example. I don't know insurance that well. I mean, as far as selling it, so I can't speak specifically about it, but I do know that there's a lot of members are finding some great solutions there. So exactly right. They're, as a group, much more powerful.
And so another thing that you're doing to bring retailers together, and I applaud, Matt, what you're doing. We talked a little bit during the prep about giving you guys some voice. I'm all for it. This is what I've been trying to do for 30 years, is to, as much as possible, to get retailers to speak with a single voice. And so another thing that you're doing to help that, move that along, is you guys have started a new group on LinkedIn for independent home improvement retailers. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what your plans are there?
I enjoy LinkedIn. I find a lot of useful information. I also find people are very accessible. Some authors or different people you would think would never really want to chat with you will have a quick conversation. Well, there must be a group for small retailers or hardware stores or independent retailer, and there isn't. So I was just going to make one. And the idea was that let's make a place for these independent retailers to sort of funnel discussions or funnel their posts so that it's a little easier to find when you're scrolling through LinkedIn. It's going to keep it all together. I know it's going to take a lot of work to kind of build it up, but I just initially sent out to my contacts, and I'm growing from there. There's just a lot of, I run across stuff just in the last couple of days. I was like, oh, that would be perfect for the group. And I just haven't had this last week, not a lot of time to devote to it, but I'm excited about the possibilities. And I noticed that your recent post, you were saying it's a struggle to find guests for your podcast. It's like, that's a perfect opportunity.
That's why you're
there.
Here, man. I was dredging the bottom of the barrel. That's why you made the cut.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll take that. But I mean, that should make it easier for you. If something interesting comes by that's related, then that'll be a lot easier. So it's a win-win for everybody. There's no, there's no salesy. It's a moderated group, so I'm not going to let any of the spam come in, and it's got to be relevant.
It's interesting when the internet was first becoming a thing. At the time, I was writing for a magazine, Paint Dealer magazine,
sure,
and me and the editor at the time, a guy by the name of Mike Matthews, if anybody listening remembers him, he was an editor for that magazine for probably 20, 25 years or so, very well known in the independent channel. And Mike and I decided we were going to start a chat room. We just called it Paint Chat. And it was basically just for paint dealers to, come in and
Sure.
share their beefs or what was on their mind. I don't remember the numbers, but we went from zero to we were a hit instantly. Dealers all of a sudden found that they had a voice, and we had manufacturers listening along. We had sales reps following along because it really became a valuable source of information for
and
them.
they all contribute, and they're all part of
Yeah.
the industry. And that's part of what I'm trying to capture, because with the association, I deal a lot with the vendor side, a lot of the dealers, not dealers, but manufacturers, and there's some great people, and there's just a divide between them and the stores. They unless you're going to a trade show or somehow and interact with them, you don't see them, and there's no way for those manufacturers to easily reach that audience either, because they could take an ad in one of the trade journals, but that's expensive and that doesn't really communicate anything.
I have a consulting gig going on right now with a European company that basically is paying me to form a focus group, because there really is no other place to go and get information on from this channel, primarily because of our disparate nature. The fact that there are 40,000 independent retail locations around the United States and 30,000 owners, so
and they're all doing their own thing. They're doing it themselves.
And so what a great way for dealers to start networking with each other and come together and maybe start working on some sort of unified message. So I applaud, Matt, what you guys are doing with that group. Why don't you say the name if anybody wants to try to find it on LinkedIn, and Brian, we can put this up on the screen.
So the official group name is Independent Retail Hardware and Home Improvement. But if you just search independent retail in groups, I think it's the first thing that comes up, because there's nothing there. So yeah, go ahead and join. If you're in the industry, you're in. It doesn't matter what you do, and just come and share. The way to support the group is to share a post. If you think something's interesting or you want to highlight somebody, put them in there, and you can. If you are social media for a company, you can not only post that on your company page, but get some more run by posting it in the group. And that's the type of material that's welcome. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be fun. So let's see what happens, and hopefully you pick up one or two people from who are listening now. And so Matt Rogers, the owner of Papenhausen Hardware in San Francisco, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time. Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about my story.